that we declare a privilege hour. So move, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Is there any objection? Chair hears none. The chair declares a privilege hour.
Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, first to avail of the opportunity to speak is the esteemed colleague from the party list Bayan Muna, the Honorable Carlos Zarate. So move, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
The gentleman from the party list Bayan Muna, the Honorable Carlos Isagani Zarate, is recognized for his privilege speech.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my esteemed colleagues, good afternoon, maayong hapon. I rise today on a personal and collective privilege to bring into the attention of this august body the wanton violations by members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines of a law that supposedly protect the interests of our children, particularly those living in the rural areas. I am referring here, Mr. Speaker, to Republic Act number 7610, otherwise known as an act providing for stronger deterrence and special protection against child abuse, exploitation, and providing penalties for its violations, which was signed into law on June 17, 1992. As a social legislation, Article 10, Section 22 of RA 7610, among others, provides that children shall not be the object of attack and shall be entitled to special respect. They shall be protected from any form of threat, assault, torture, or other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment. It also provides that public infrastructure, such as schools, hospitals, and rural health units shall not be utilized for military purposes, such as command posts, barracks, detachments, and supply depots. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, despite the clear mandate of the law, particularly the non-utilization as military facility of public structures, members of the AFP continue to violate and take the same for granted. The latest violation of this nature, Mr. Speaker, was the January 25, 2014 encampment by at least 36 members of the Philippine Army's 25th Infantry Battalion of the Salugpungan, Tatano, Ekanugon Community Learning Center, located in Sitio Side 4, Barangay Mangayon, Compostela Town, Compostela Valley Province. The Learning Center, a DepEd accredited alternative school for indigenous Filipinos, is located in the center of Barangay Mangayon, which, like several other hinterland villages in the province, has also been affected by the counterinsurgency operations conducted by the government troops against the New People's Army. But, Mr. Speaker, before I proceed, allow me to show a short video clip showing the Army's occupation of the said alternative school.
Back ni sir, kaya mo ang school ka. Have the respect to. Kaon mi diri dito mo sa ilaha amo ang CEO mananghin na mapahawaon mi diri sa eskwelahan. Yung anak mo sa kakauban niya. Wag na sa uban nga 500 meters. Di ka sa komunidad dito mo. Nya tingnan pa dito niya nga asa na to nga mabasa.
Ang gusto mo school. Ito ano ka? Ginagamit ang eskwelahan para
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very clear from that short video clip, Mr. Speaker, that what the soldiers did is not only illegal, the occupation of the school, but it was meant to harass and even sow fear among the residents of the area. Indeed, after the community was surprised by the arrival of the 25th IB soldiers, who even threatened the teachers and branded the school as an NPA school, the student as well as their parents were expectedly frightened and opted to stay home instead. This is truly condemnable and lamentable, Mr. Speaker, because for a long time, the Lumad or the indigenous children in the said place did not enjoy the right to have an education until the said alternative school came about. The school, constructed by the joint efforts and resources of the indigenous peoples and some well-meaning people's organizations, currently has 130 Lumad or indigenous pupils in its preschool to grade 5 sections. It was previously damaged by Typhoon Pablo, but was rebuilt with the help of funds from the Redemptorist Brothers, Ateneo de Davao University, and Balsa Mindanao, a network formed in response to humanitarian crises. While the soldiers, Mr. Speaker, grudgingly left the school premises several days later, following repeated objections by the residents and concerned groups, yet it is not a guarantee that they will not come back and occupy again the said alternative learning school. In fact, during a recent dialogue hosted by Davao City Mayor Rodrigo Duterte, some residents claimed that while the soldiers left the school premises, they instead merely transferred and occupied the houses of some residents in the community. The experience of the residents of Barangay Mangayon, Compostela Town, Compostela Valley was not the first of such cases, Mr. Speaker. In the past, several cases of similar nature where schools and other public facilities were being used for military purposes had also been reported. This practice has now become common, especially in the government's pursuit of its current Oplan Bayanihan counterinsurgency program. For example, Mr. Speaker, in March of 2011, the Blaan Literary School and Learning Center, situated in Sitio Lumay, Barangay Upper Suyan, Malapatan, Sarangani Province, was also closed for several months due to the encampment made by the members of the Army's 73rd IB. The Learning Center, established by the Center for Lumad Advocacy and Services, or CLANS, is also recognized by the Department of Education under the Alternative Learning Systems Program. In another case, in November of 2011, the New York-based Human Rights Watch has also condemned such military practice when it also called for an end to the unlawful use of schools for military purposes. The human rights statements came after it has separately documented 5 cases in several areas of the Cordillera Autonomous Region where the military, in violation of Philippine and international law, had used parts or functioning schools as barracks or bases for military detachments since 2009. What happened to Compostela Valley, Sarangani Province, and the Cordillera region mirror how Oplan Bayanihan, the so-called peace and development campaigns, are but a rehash, Mr. Speaker, a rehashed version of the previous administration's Oplan Bantaylaya that also vilified legitimate civil society and people's organizations and individuals. The Human Rights Alliance Karapatan has in fact documented from July 2010 to December 2013 at least 18 cases of minors as victims of extrajudicial killings and 132,633 others, mostly children, as rights violation victims in the course of the government's use of such venues for military purposes. Mr. Speaker, this wanton violation occurred despite the fact that even the AFP hierarchy already issued Letter Directive Number 34 on November 24, 2009, mandating that basic infrastructures such as schools, hospitals, and health units shall not be utilized for military purposes such as command posts, barracks, and the likes. While several appeals by concerned groups, both locally and internationally, have already been made and raised to stop this practice, yet this apparently fell on deaf ears. Mr. Speaker, these illegal acts, I submit, will even become worsened in the coming days following the approval by DepEd Secretary Armin Luistro last December 13, 2013, of Memorandum Number 22 that supposedly sets the procedures for the approval and monitoring of the AFP's activities in public schools, including the submission of post-activity reports by school principals and reports on any violation of the AFP guidelines. Again, Mr. Speaker, even with the said guidelines already in place, the encampment of soldiers in Compostela Valley still happened, and the subject soldiers apparently even justified their acts in occupying the said school. These acts, we repeat, Mr. Speaker, do not only violate Republic Act 7160, but also other international protocols wherein our country is signatory. Among these are the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and its optional protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflict, the UN Security Council Resolution Number 1612, establishing the monitoring and reporting mechanisms on grave child rights violations in situations of armed conflict, and the UN Security Council Resolution Number 1882, which calls for decisive state actions on abuses against children in situations of armed conflict. Mr. Speaker, my dear colleagues, this representation thus reiterates the call of child rights advocates and other human rights groups for the members of the AFP to stop this illegal practice of using public facilities like schools as command posts, barracks, detachments, and depot in the conduct of its counter-insurgency operations. Along this end, Mr. Speaker, this representation will also file an appropriate resolution for the proper House Committee to investigate these illegal actions committed by our government troops in the conduct of their counter-insurgency operations, particularly in that the same affect the rights and lives of our children. I humbly urge my colleagues to support this investigation. Finally, Mr. Speaker, to echo the calls made by the Human Rights Watch, it says that the establishment of army camps at schools puts both children's security and their education at risk. Schools should be places for learning and play, free from fear. Thank you, my dear colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.